We so appreciate your being here, and we appreciate your interest in promoting respect, acceptance, and inclusion for everyone in our community, which is the goal of the Race Relations Coalition. The ultimate goal of the Community Race Relations Coalition is really to create unity. We cannot have unity, however, until we have justice. And a large part of working toward justice is appreciating and coming to value the diversity in the human family. One of the things that is so important in trying to do this is to be very purposeful in nurturing close friendships with people of other colors and cultures. And we have to be purposeful about this because we've created so many barriers which prevent us from getting to know each other and from understanding each other. The CRRC really strives to provide opportunities for us to learn from each other. And tonight is one of those opportunities. This webinar is one of those opportunities in discussing Black parenting. I'm really certain that any one of us who has been a parent understands how this is one of the most stressful roles that we can possibly have in our lives. And, parenting is just absolutely ridden with uncertainty and guilt and fear and frustration. But for Black parents and parents of Black children, particularly parents of Black sons, this is tremendously compounded. It's really compounded because of the lack of value of Black lives that exists in our society. And some of the huge factors are that the disparate treatment and punishment that starts at such early ages for children of color. And then beyond that, of course, the mass incarceration of Black men, and both public and police harassment and beatings and shootings. So we're going to start off this evening with a short film. It's just about 6.5 minutes long, called Shazam. And it's a very, I can't really even watch this film without tearing up. To me, it was a very moving film the very first time I saw it, just illustrating the concerns, the overriding concerns of Black parents, and also how creative parents have to become in dealing with this. So Colwyn's going to start this film for us called Shazam.
What are you doing?
Shh. It's about to get very serious in here. Oh yeah? Well, I have the power to defeat the evil empire. We'll see them. What's that? What is it?
Open it up and see.
What is it?
It's time you knew the truth. Son, you're a superhero.
Oh, please.
Hey. Superheroes are very real, okay? They live among us.
That's you?
Yeah? That's me the day that Grandpa gave me that outfit. I was about your age, and now, passing it on to you.
This feels kind of funny.
That's just your body getting used to the powers.
What's my power?
You have the ability to shine as bright as the sun.
You mean, like, I get to fireball at people?
No, son. You have the ability to be seen.
Seen? What kind of superpower is that?
No. Not everybody can be seen. You ever notice when we walking down the street how people stare at us extra special?
Yeah?
That's it. That's the power. And with this power comes a lot of responsibility, okay? There are gonna be people who don't like that you have powers and they don't. They're not gonna like that you shine so bright.
What do you mean? They might not want to be my friend?
Maybe.
But I'm friends with everyone. People like me.
I know, son. But there's gonna be some people who are jealous about that, and they may try to take away your powers. You know what Malcolm's daddy does?
Yeah, he's a policeman. They get the bad guys.
Right. Well, some policemen, not all, okay, some, they try to hunt down superheroes just like us.
They might want to hurt me?
Yeah, they may try to.
No, I don't want it.
Hey, listen, stop it. Okay? Listen to me. No matter how you feel, you can't change who you are. You're a superhero, son. Now listen, it's very important to me that you understand that. Okay? I know. Listen, son, I know, okay? I felt the same way when I was your age, all right? But hey, listen. What if I told you there was a way around all this, okay? What if I told you there was a way for you to protect yourself and to not lose your powers? It's called Shazam.
What is Shazam?
Okay, when a policeman walks up to you and tries to talk to you, you just go, Shazam! And put your hands straight up like this, okay? That way it'll put a protective shield around you and nobody can hurt you. Okay, but this is very important. You must keep your hands up in Shazam. Don't try to reach in your pockets. Don't try to show them anything. Just keep your hands straight up. You understand? You do that and you'll be fine, okay? Try it out.
Shazam! 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 Daddy, I can feel the superpowers. I can feel it.
That's good, son.
Shazam! 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 Shazam!
So, friends, our panel members tonight will share some of their special concerns and experiences in parenting, some who have raised children, some who are raising children, and the perspective of one Black son on our panel. So first, I would like to introduce Patricia Wilson. Patricia is a professor at the Baylor Law School, and she is the mother of two, and she and her husband, Mike, have fostered exactly 20 foster children, almost all of whom were in groups of siblings, which are, of course, always harder to place in foster care. And now they are grandparents, and so are getting a taste of another kind of parenting in grandparenting. Patricia is going to share her experiences helping her children, her own children and foster children, deal with all the issues that arise for children of color, and their experiences in helping these children through this while trying to maintain good self-images and ways of coping with all of these things. So take it away, Patricia.
Well, first of all, Joe, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm going to try to keep to the time that is allotted, but I do want to note that the Shazam video was very, very powerful in making the point about Black children being seen The flip side of that is that in some ways, our Black children are invisible, where their accomplishments, things that ought to be recognized often are not seen, which, creates kind of a conundrum for parents. And I'm sorry that of all times now the house phone decides to ring. Either way, I do think it is interesting that this panel discussion is occurring as the Derek Chauvin trial is ongoing, and clearly the video as well as what's going on isn't necessary to remind us of the challenges of raising Black children. Parenting, Joe, as you indicated, is already difficult, but I do think that there are some things that are even more challenging for parents of Black children. So what I'd like to use my time talking about is some of the strategies that we employed and some of the things that we had to think about, because almost all the children that we fostered were African-American children. Of course, our own children are all African-Americans. And so we've lived those challenges. So I want to talk about discipline, because of course we know that Black children are often treated differently, but I also want to talk about, even before then, the things that we had to think about as children, as parents of African-American children. I think other parents don't have to think about, starting with where to send them to school. We had to think about what was most important to us. Did we go with those schools that offered the best academics, that would give them the best educational foundation? And if we did, would we lose something in the sense that some of the best schools in Waco, often, at least at the time we were looking at schools, were lacking in their self-esteem for a stronger educational foundation? And ultimately, we did decide to send 3 or 4 children. It didn't come at a cost. The cost in terms of self-esteem for the children. My children did not have a single African-American teacher. And I think, looking back, they might have had no more than 2, and I really think only 1. That in and of itself shows an environment that was sort of devoid of the kind of role models that you would like to have your children see. And then there was the social aspects of it. And I'm just going to talk about one example, just the cost that we paid, which in some ways seems trivial, but it's not unimportant, and that is with regards to the social aspects. My oldest daughter went to private schools from kindergarten all the way through, and as I think Joe mentioned, or she will tell you, that our kids went to school together. At the time our kids were at Vanguard, 2/3 of the African-American children at Vanguard lived at my house, which I'll tell you what the environment was like. What that meant for my daughter, though, it was that all of her classmates were white. And when it came time for those events, like, the formal dance, I knew it was going to be difficult, because I knew she probably would not get invited to go. And so she would come home and she would talk about which boy had asked which girl to go. And I knew that it hurt her that she wasn't going to, in all likelihood, get asked. Not because she doesn't have a winning personality, because she does, not because she, and I'm not just saying that because I'm her mother, not because she lacked confidence, but, it was asking a lot for the boys to step outside. So eventually, as she got to be a senior and the kids started to perhaps have a little bit more confidence, she did get invited, but that was tough during those years. But let me also talk about discipline and the approach that we took, because we knew that our children were going to stand out. And the approach that we always took, my husband and I, was we were going to make sure that the teachers and the school officials knew 2 things. 1, we were their allies. And 2, they better always be able to explain what they had done. We weren't going to pretend like our kids were such perfect kids that they never did anything wrong. But whatever they were alleged to have done, We wanted to, they didn't have to be able to explain it and to reassure us that whatever discipline was meted out was fair. And so with virtually every kid that we had for any length of time, our own kids or with our foster kids, that was our intentional thought out strategy that we would tell the teachers and the principal when we first met them, we are on your side. And if our kids act up, we will be there to help you say that is not okay. But I did have several instances where I had to say, okay, can you explain to me what my child did? Because he or she can't seem to explain that to me. So I don't know if it's their problem or if it's your problem. And I had to challenge a couple times. Is that the way you treated the other children? And I tried very hard never to be accusatory, but rather to simply ask questions. What happened to other children? Was my child the only one that was doing that? What did you do with the other children? Why did you do that? So that, and I could always tell whether they knew that they had treated my child fairly or not, because simply asking the questions often meant that they would start to hem and haw around if they really couldn't explain it. And my point was never to get them to change whatever discipline, but rather to simply say, I'm the parent who's always going to ask you to explain. So you need to treat my children right. I had an advantage, I think, in the sense that I could always, they knew, or I could let them know, I'm a lawyer, I'm a law professor, and that gave me some credibility. The last thing I want to say, because again, I'm going to try to keep to my time, is that I think it's incumbent on everyone, other Black parents, as well as non-Black parents, to be on the lookout and to speak up and to say, I am going to question anytime I think that there may have been some treatment that was unfair. So, Joe, I think I kept it to just a little bit over 7 minutes. I'm going to stop.
Sorry, I forgot I muted myself. So now, thank you so much, Patricia. I appreciate that so much. And now we're going to move on to our next panel member, Brian Delco. Brian is pastor of St. James United Methodist Church in Temple. And he also, besides tending to his own church, he also coaches and mentors youth in other United Methodist churches. He is the husband of Tara and the father of 5 children, ranging in age from 34 down to 3 years old. And Brian will be sharing some parenting, kind of parenting now and then, or then and now, and hopefully covering, kind of illustrating if there are any differences between when he parented his older children versus what is going on with his youngest 3-year-old son. So, Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe. Truly privileged with everyone on the panel. I thought Patricia did such a great job, and we definitely share some similarities with some things that she's kind of pointed out. As you pointed out, I am 50-something years old with a grandfather, but also a father of a 3-year-old. And so having raised, been there, having older kids and having now a 3-year-old, and there are some challenges that I seem to face. What I would say this, and I know time is limited, and that the one thing, let me back up. I thought the clip was, Shazam was great. It also reminds me of something recently my wife and I sat down and saw, and maybe everyone wants to go and watch if you haven't seen it, but Queen Sugar, I think it was last week's episode. If you're not familiar with that show, Ralph Angel, one of the characters, has to inform his son Blue about what to do when he encounters police. And it was a very moving segment. My wife and I both sitting there with tears. It was that moving and powerful. So that's something too you may want to look at. A really powerful episode. But I think as I looked at the difference between my older kids and my 3-year-old. I never thought that I would be at this place and as concerned as I am for my 3-year-old. And interesting enough, I'm more concerned now with my 3-year-old than I was with my 34-year-old. And I think that's what's troubling, that I have more concerns for him. Like Patricia, and it's hard for me to hit, I have enough kids to where it's hard for me to hit too many stories, but like my oldest kind of went through public, but then my last to my youngest went matriculated through very elite private schools in Houston, and was actually went through the middle school during the Obama years. As Obama was elected, she was in middle school, just starting 6th grade at a private school there, and encountered quite a few things. That was a challenging time for my daughter, as well as my family in general. We could feel the tension. It was very, very thick. Ultimately, to the extent that my wife pushed for me to move my daughter to another school. I didn't want to. She was performing well. The academics were great. And didn't really want to move her, but it got so bad to where we felt that it was necessary. I think for me, one of the important things that I've tried to instill in my kids, and make sure that they were truly given a sense of self. I am one to believe that, and I heard Patricia kind of mention and allude to this in terms of the academics. And the importance of academics, but also the importance of making sure that kids have a good image, a good idea of who they are. And those are some of the things that I've tried to do through the years with my kids, is to make sure, number one, to be there as a father in those times when they really needed me, and to support them, but also to make sure that they had a strong sense of self. That's something that I received. I grew up in a predominantly African-American, predominantly Black city. And I had a very strong sense of who I was as a Black person, and was very comfortable in that. And I've tried to instill those principles into my kids, and to give them the understanding that they could achieve anything, that there are no ceilings. But at the same time, just as in a movie, that there's some real threats, and how you manage that and how you navigate those things. And as I said, I'm shocked that at this point that I feel more pressure with my 3-year-old at this point, that I actually am more worried about him than any of the kids. And I'm already seeing it. I think Patricia alluded to some of this, the circumstances in Waco. And I'm one of those people, I'm going to research everything out. And I've researched, even as it relates to my 3-year-old, I've researched all the schools and looked at their numbers, their ratings, everything. And even their makeup, which, to my surprise, almost every school district, and there are a lot of school districts in this small area, even those districts where you only have maybe one or two students I've discovered is that the staff is 70%, typically 70% white, even where the number of students are high in terms of population of students, in terms of Black students, it's still the staff is actually majority white. And so that's been a challenge, you know, because as a parent, I want a safe environment where my child can flourish, where my 3-year-old can grow into the full potential of who he is. And you know, I'm a preacher, and so full potential of who God's created him to be. I was saying, I always say that your gift, my color is my gift to the world. And my difference, that's my difference, and that's my gift. And so I want my son's gift to shine. And that's not always the case in every place. And we've already faced some challenges, even as early as daycare, where we've had to move him. Right now, it's a strain on my family. I'm literally, my wife and I, we elected, although I pastor a church in Temple, I still live in Waco. My wife works in Waco, but we've elected to put him in a daycare in Temple because there was more of a mix, and it was Black owned. And we just could not, and we have struggled to find the right environment for him. Quickly at early ages, our kids are labeled, tagged, and there's a low tolerance for our kids, especially male. It's very difficult for a young Black boy to just be a young Black 2-year-old boy. Because many of our daycares in this area seem to be run by majority white women, and so many of them. There's an abundance of them, and you know, you're looking for everything. I think Patricia alluded to this. You want good academics, but you also want your kid to be in a safe environment where that child can flourish based upon who he or she is, you know, as fully accepted. And one of the things that I've, you know, my youngest daughter just recently graduated from Howard in DC and is getting ready to go to physical therapy school outside of in Georgia. She and I were talking recently, and we talked about how the importance of a sense of self. And she, even though she matriculated through this white private school sector, we made sure that she had a strong sense of who she was, because I felt she had the academic prowess to excel at anywhere. I knew that. What concerned me was the social aspects of and her sense of self and identity. So we really did quite a few things to make sure that was developed in her. You know, various organizations, and really intentional. And I will say, as a pastor, the church played a significant role in that development as well. I have pastored predominantly Black churches, and that played her involvement as she talks about those experiences and how much that meant in shaping her identity and giving a sense of self. Jack and Jill and so many other organizations similar to that, and I know there's some new things that are out there, but making sure that she fully understood who she was as a Black person, and not necessarily trying to feel as though she has to deny who she is. I think for me, I've been very intentional about that with my kids, helping them to celebrate their Blackness. I just truly believe that the strongest sense of self is what allows us to mix, mingle, to interact with people of all races. And so I don't know what my time is, Joe. Am I running out of time?
Maybe a little bit, Brian, but you and I have an issue with this, as you know, from the past. I said, you and I have an issue from the MLK commemoration. You and I have an issue with this from the past, but yeah, if you can wrap it up, then we'll have more time for questions and answers later.
Okay. And so, but that challenge, my challenge, and I know you wanted me to talk a little bit about where we were with TJ, my 3-year-old, and some of the challenges. But that's my challenge is really making sure that he's in a safe environment. And that has been, and from an education standpoint, that, I do see that being somewhat of a challenge today, and more so today than ever. And so just with the climate that we live in terms of race, the challenges that we're facing right now in this area. So I'll stop there because I could probably go on, and there's so many other things. So I'm trying to be succinct.
And we will have time to expound on things when we get to the question and answer session too. So thank you so much, Brian. So next we have Justin Rice. And Justin is with the United Way of McLennan County, and he's in charge of grants and impact for the United Way. He is the treasurer also of the Waco chapter of the NAACP, and he is a Black son. One of the reasons that one of our board members suggested when we were talking about doing this webinar that we have the perspective of a child growing up and their reaction to how they were being parented and what they were being told and things. And so we are really glad to have Justin here with us today, who can talk about, he's no longer a child, but he's a young man who can kind of talk about his reaction to how his parents handled these concerns and stresses that he was going through, which of course became concerns and stresses for his parents as well. So Justin, thank you for being here, and take it away.
All righty. Thank you, Joe. All right. So good evening, everyone. Again, so I guess, but really, I'm the combo breaker. Everyone else is a parent of a Black child. I am that Black child. I don't have any children of my own. So really, I guess I'm just looking at the perspective of what it was like growing up and how my parents did it. I guess really I should talk about my parents first. My parents were both in the Army. Mother was honorably discharged after 12 years. She ended as a drill sergeant, and my father, 82nd Airborne, first sergeant, before he retired after 23 years. And so there was a lot of discipline in the house, essentially. And of course and my brother, Jordan Rice, he is autistic, and he's a great guy. A lot of people knew him more than me. He was the quintessential ladies' man, we always said. And so that is our family. And I would say really both of my parents grew up, both of them were born in, my mother in 1958 in Jackson, Mississippi, my mother and my dad in Minden, Louisiana. So kind of at the tail end of Jim Crow. So they know, and in the Deep South, essentially. So they grew up with the pitfalls of what it meant to be Black in America. And really, when I was growing up, there was a lot of times where I was like, why are my parents so, especially my mother, why are you so like uber protective? I thought she was like a helicopter parent, essentially. I thought she was always just overprotective. And Patricia and Brian, it's interesting when you talk about having to, make sure you're wanting to make sure your kids get the best education possible. And so my parents like put me in schools that, did end up being predominantly white. And so the issue with my parents was, how do we make sure our son, he maintains his identity, make sure that he knows he is still Black. And that was a challenge for them. And I feel that really like a lot of the formative time for me when that started really hitting, especially was Brian talked about during the Obama years. I still remember in high school, I was sitting in the it was after band. It was like during band practice, and we had the inauguration was going on. It was historic. We never had a Black president before. And so it was, and so we were all watching. But right after right as the speech ended, someone dropped like a book loudly at the end, almost like, kind of thinking it was, like he got shot. So that kind of like got the ear turn of like, oh, that's new. Something basically changed. And suddenly like some of my friends, like my white friends especially, became more, how would I describe it? Their views were a bit more different than they were before. They were a bit more, I don't want to say conservative, but just like how they saw race became different, how they saw like just the things they probably were hearing from their parents just became different. And so I had to deal, and so that identity and dealing with how, your friends even can suddenly just turn essentially. And I remember years later after when I got into Baylor, essentially, I was one of the first students I did early admission. So for early application. And so I was the first one to get it back. And then, but so my friends, they didn't take it too well. One of them, who I considered one of my best friends, even said, well, with affirmative action, all that stuff. And I was just like, wow. And he was a top 10 graduate at the school. He dropped out after a year once he got into college, and a lot of my friends did. And so basically, my parents always had to have, it was a constant always needing to reassure me that I am intelligent, I am smart, I can do whatever I put my mind to. Because there's a lot of people at schools, when you go to especially predominantly white school, that don't make you feel that way. And so if you're a Black parent and they know, they'll tell you, you always have to, it's a constant fight to ensure that your child, especially if you're a Black boy, is that that their self-esteem is high, and that that you love them and care for them, and that they can do anything. And there, of course, I also want to touch on the idea that it was probably early, especially when I started driving, that my parents really started talking to me about potential of if I ever get stopped and pulled over by the police. I was like, is it really going to be that bad? This was before really we really started seeing things like Philando Castile. And so they had to give me the talk of, you always have to make sure keep your hand on the steering wheel. I was like, well, what if I need to reach for my wallet? Don't reach for it until they ask for you specifically. And, at first I was like, is it really that bad? It's years later when we started seeing the shootings, thanks to social media and thanks to cell phones, we really started seeing how bad it was, and that, yes, it is that bad. The lack of accountability, and that again, not all police, but that there is that bias in the system that basically paints you as a target, paints you as someone to fear. And so basically it's just been a battle to ensure, it's been a battle essentially to recognize, to know that, you know, in this country, as a Black man, especially as a Black child, you have essentially a target on your back. And so it's bad that you have to basically always make sure you're on the straight and narrow. You can't fall off it, because even if you fall off it once, what my mom always told me, especially when going to college, college was the way. If you fall off once, like I was like, well, my friends can like drop out of college and get good jobs. Like, yes, but they're white. Quite a few of them are white, and they can bounce back. You can't. And so making sure, or if you get into an accident, or if in a sense of you, or if you're caught doing something, they can probably get away with it. They have the money, they have the influence, you don't. And so that's basically, that's just been the story of being a Black son. My parents having to constantly reassure me that, you know, not only that, you know, that there is danger in this world, in this society, but also that I can do whatever I put my mind to. And that, and you know, because of them, I have so far succeeded. Graduated from Baylor, ended up with my master's in Tarleton State. And that's all because they were willing to, they had to fight that battle for me and for my brother.
Wow. Justin, thank you so very much. At the very beginning, when you started to speak, I thought, wow, a drill sergeant for a mother.
She seems nice.
My family used to call, my husband used to call me the drill sergeant of the two of us, but she was a real drill sergeant. Well, thank you very much for that. So now I'm so happy to welcome our next panelist, who is April Neal, who's kind of a longstanding friend of mine. I think we've known each other since you were in middle school, I think, April. April is a mother and of a young, she's a young mother of a toddler, 2.5 years old, Caden. She is an author and a singer and a poetess. And I asked her specifically if she would serve on this panel because she has a young child, as does Brian with his 3-year-old. This is her first child, and she is young and he is young. And so she's going to share with us some of her hopes and dreams for her toddler son, and also some of her concerns. So April, welcome.
Thanks for having me. So when I first found out I was going to be a mom, I was, you know, already processing what that would look like. Once I got further in the pregnancy and found out I was having a son, I had to process different worries. And so for Cade, I hope that, you know, just like he can go to schools where he can learn the best so that he isn't placed in any type of programs just based on things I've seen working in schools within like people of color. I hope that he always has access to good community and doesn't have to fear walking a future pet, or just I can say, hey, my son can go play outside in the neighborhood and not fear that somebody may call law enforcement because he doesn't look like he lives there, or just all the crazy things you hear about that you don't think could ever happen until they happen in your city, until they happen to someone that you know, or till it just, yeah, this is the reality of the situation. Living here, sometimes when I travel, I talk about it to my other friends, they're like, I just don't feel like it's so bad where I live. And they might be in LA or they might be in DC. And sometimes I wonder if before my son gets to be like 9 or 10, if I'm going to relocate from the South, just to see if there'll be a difference in me feeling like my son is safe. If the dynamics or the racial climate and the tension will look different in another city if the demographics are different. Even like when I'm looking for jobs or looking to move, I have to look at the city demographics, but also like thread through things that you might not see, things I might not know, incidents that may have happened within law enforcement, so that I know prior to, like, I think I'm hyper aware, but like, I don't know, trying not to partner with fear, but also being very cautious so that if something were to happen, I wouldn't feel like I placed us in a situation so that this could occur, even though it's almost like, how safe can you be, right? I think it's scary knowing that it could be anything, because the thing that could cause Cadence harm or could cause me to lose my child could be something as simple as just his appearance, just his skin. I work with a lot of law enforcement, and I've attended trainings, and I remember sitting in one and just listening to the radioed in call from the officer, but also the call from the person in the park right before the Tamir Rice shooting. Tamir Rice was 12, and he was shot within 1.5 seconds of the cop car pulling up, which is insane. Little details I didn't know. But it hurt me when I heard the officer call in the shooting and say, hey, there's been a shooting, a police-involved shooting. Suspect looks about 20 years old, Black male. And I'm like, he's 12. I don't know how you get 20 years old from that, or it was just a whole nother wake-up call that, like, little Black boys don't get to be children or preteens, that a lot of times they're already seen as an adult or like just threatening just based on appearance, and their appearance is just, you know. So my son is 2, and besides the little water gun he plays with in the tub, I don't even like the game when he walks up to me like pew pew. And he's really into Toy Story right now. So of course he has a Woody doll, and you know, he loves all those things. And I'm just like, I need to like also just let him be a kid and just not, first of all, push my fear on him or anything like that. Try to keep him as innocent as possible for as long as I can, but also making sure, I just feel like sometimes in my community, ignorance isn't bliss, it's detrimental. And so just trying to find a thin line for that. I know the importance of therapy, but I really, really believe in it now that I've become a parent, because I'm just constantly, I don't know if this is like every mom's thing, but, or if it was just like postpartum, but I was constantly worried about him all the time. Cadence has asthma and all these things. And later on when I share my poem, I talk about it a little bit, where I'm like, I hear it said often by nurses and people, like, people always saying they can't breathe. And if you can talk, you can breathe. And you're like, I have asthma. And I know when I feel like I can't breathe is when I'm starting to struggle. And I'm like, you know, I can't breathe. And if I don't get my asthma pumped soon, I really won't be able to. I'm starting to struggle to breathe, but I don't have time to say all those things. So I'm just going to say, I can't breathe. Hopefully you can help me. And just like the whole I can't breathe, being a real thing within the Black Lives Matter movement. And at the same time, knowing that there are people, especially who work in medical and law enforcement, who are like, I I hear it all the time, like, they can breathe, they're fine. And I'm like, one day, what if he's just even telling the teacher, like, hey, I'm struggling to breathe, and it's just dismissed, just because sometimes people think Black people, don't even get me on Black women, but like you can just take more pain or take things more than any other human. I don't know. I hope the best for him at all times. I hope that he has real friends and real allies his entire life, like I've been fortunate to have. But also that he doesn't feel inferior in any kind of way, that he doesn't feel fearful when he goes away from me for a trip or a camp, or, you know, that anything would happen to him solely based on, I don't want anything to happen to him, let's be clear, but solely because of how he looks, or his lineage or ancestry, like that. That would just, I just don't want that for my kid. And I hope to be as proactive as possible so that he isn't hit with some shock factor. Yeah, I don't know how to explain that, but I want him to know the realities of, you know, just being aware of your surroundings instead of being afraid of them. Being able to tell me or remember where you were, what was the badge number if necessary, anything you can tell me, so that if something were to make him feel even scared in the moment, he knows to reach out to me. But I also want my son to feel safe approaching law enforcement. If he was lost, if he could walk up and say, hey, I'm lost, could you help me find? Without him being afraid of law enforcement either. I don't want my son to be in fear in this country at all. I also feel though, like if I'm not confident by the time my son is 13 or 14, we will just relocate, because that's what I have to do to make sure I don't lose my son at some crazy age at the hand of racism alone. Then that's what I'm going to do.
Thank you so much, April. I think we can really feel your pain, especially all your hopes and dreams that we have for our children when they're young. And I hope everything goes well for you. So I want to remind everyone, and especially if you are an attendee that came in a little bit late, that if you have questions for the panel members in general or a specific panel member, if you go to the Q&A button, you can type in your question and we will have a time for that after our last panel member speaks. So our fifth member of the panel is Drexel King. And Drexel is a people team coach with Magnolia. And he is the father of 8 children, even though he looks like he could be one of Brian's children at about 35 years old. And Drexel has formed a cohort of Black fathers here in Waco. And he is tonight going to take some time and talk to us tonight about this group's purpose and its focus. So welcome, Drexel King.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks all for letting me be on the panel. Cohen, if you could go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint, and while he's doing that, I'll just give a little bit of background about myself. I actually grew up in North Carolina, so I'm not a native Wacoan, but thank you all for accepting me. I love it here. I like Waco. Plan to stay as long as the Lord will keep us. My parents went to HBCUs in North Carolina, as did my sister. And, so went to AME Church in North Carolina, African Methodist Episcopal. And so lovely experience. I will say though, me personally, my sister would see it differently. She has a little bit darker skin than I do. And, me personally, I grew up going to a private white school. My mom was kind of like, the earlier panelist, Brian, I got to get him in the best of the best. And she pushed that. And I was in a position of being sort of the token, not sort of, I was. You know, I was the guy they would look to, like, why can't all Black people be like Drexel, good grades, athlete, well spoken. It wasn't until I got older, much older, that I realized, like, you know, my parents always taught me, you know, if there's a wall in front of you, like, go over, go under, go through, go around, you know, just don't let it stop you. You keep going. If there's people who are just haters, racist, whatever, you just chart a new course, you keep moving around it. It wasn't until I got older that I realized, like, hold up, like, yeah, let's do that. Let's maneuver. But this is a problem. Like, we got to change the system here. You know, the water we're all swimming in is bad, and we need to adjust the levels of what's going on. And so, and it wasn't really until I, you know, grew up in the AME, like I said, got into the white church later on. It wasn't until I sort of experienced that sort of church hurt, that some of these things became ever apparent. And so, um, this is kind of what led to the group. You know, I want a place where my kids can grow up. We homeschool. Shout out to my wife. She's amazing. 8 children, as mentioned earlier. The oldest is 10. The youngest is 4 months. And so I want a space where, you know, my children are going to a church or are surrounded by Black kids, you know, in a healthy way. And they're not going to a space, especially at church, where we're supposed to be worshiping God together, where they're seeing people worship, but then they're getting these subtle lies about kind of who they are and how they associate, you know, with people who don't look like them. So I'm not, you know, obviously you got to be in the world and you got to engage with folks. You know, I'm not trying to isolate my children, but I do want them to grow up in a space where they don't have these assumptions, just because of people they are surrounded by that could, you know, harm them in certain situations. You know, just because Joey does this doesn't mean you can do it. And so I just don't want them growing up without knowing context, and how other people will view them. I want them to be able to grow up with other kids who experience the same things, and they can still have fun and enjoy one another. So that's kind of the impetus of the group. Quite selfishly, I want my kids to hang around other Black kids. On another level, you know, I want fathers. You know, the fatherhood struggle is real. You know, there's a stat that I'll mention some stats later, but one stat's not on there. 1 in 3 Black men will go to prison in their lifetime. 1 in 3. You know, you multiply that out, right? 2 and 6, if I'm doing my math right. I was a Marine. We don't do maths. You know, 3 and 9, right? Not good numbers. And so, what can we do in our community to help the just the challenges that are unique to Black fathers? And so, we spent the last couple of sessions. I'll get into our purpose here in a second, but we spent the last couple of sessions. We meet at a park here in Waco from 10 to 12 every 4th Saturday, and we do some park cleanup. The fathers will spend some time just with the kids, kid activity kind of thing, bonding, you know, seeing it. It's a beautiful thing when you see like 30 children out there playing together. After that, we kind of have some type of speaking deal. So the last one before this, we just did mental health with a counselor here who lives in Waco, Black counselor, which is rare in itself. Talked about some of the challenges for the Black community, mental health, some of the myths, which is, you know, which is so good information we need to hear. We talked about some just things you can do in your own time right now, breathing exercises to help with your mental health. But before that, we talked about hiring. You know, how do you get hired? How do you write a resume to get get more attraction and things like that? And so we're trying to do like a little teaching moment each time. And so The next one, which is April, we'll talk about later, but I'll talk with the leadership team. We're thinking about either Black entrepreneurship or something around raising Black teens, which is kind of what I'm interested in. I got a 10-year-old, so it's almost there for me. So anyways, Black Fathers of Waco is the group. We just started this last year, really, but we started meeting this year. If you go to the next slide, here's our purpose. The purpose of Black Fathers of Waco is to serve as a support mechanisms for Black fathers in the city of Waco. That's what we're here to do. Move to the next one. A couple stats for you. Waco is 43% white, and they hold 80% of the jobs, making over 40,000. If you heard that stat kind of anywhere else, 43% of the people are holding 80% of the wealth. If you heard that anywhere else, regardless of what you know about the Black-white dynamics in America, that should shock you. And so what's going on, with that, there's something that just more reasons why the Black community has some unique struggles. The average yearly income in Waco, 30,000. The percent of the Waco population making below 25,000. You see down there, Black is 50%, whereas others are doing way better. 83% of Black people in Waco graduate with a high school diploma, 8% with a college degree. So those are just some stats that lead to the impetus of the group. You go to the next slide. Here's our pillars. Support, restore, inspire, and celebrate Black fatherhood. That's what it's all about. You go to the next one. Here's some of the guys at one of our meetings. We support Black fathers and future Black fathers in the parenting journey through fellowship, education, and brotherhood. Some of these guys aren't even fathers yet, soon to be. And so they're out there to just learn, soak it in, but that's so important for them to see how others are doing it. And so we try to go to parks that are in our communities so we can meet others who are just out there randomly. It's always nice when I walk up to the guy who's just there, and I'm like, hey man, we're doing this thing, get over here, come on. But we also want to support Black business owners. I'm trying to compile a list of all the Black businesses in Waco. I have a list of restaurants, but what are the other businesses? Like if you need your car worked on, or if you need taxes done, what are those businesses? So I'm trying to compile a list so that we can just refer one another to these businesses. If you got some names, please email me, name, phone number of them and things like that. My email will be at the end. If you could go to the next slide. Okay, restore Black values. We will restore our focus on manhood, fatherhood, and reverence of God by restoring the image of positive Blackness amongst ourselves and the community. There's oftentimes a negative image, especially if you see Black men hanging together like that. And not just amongst others, but sometimes that exists within ourselves. A young kid just, it just exists. We can only go so far just because of our skin color. Let's restore the positive images of Black, and there's so much to be positive about. And so that's part of our goal as well. You go to the next one. Inspire Black youth. We will inspire our kids to be image bearers as we encourage their dreams and ideas for their future success. We will also encourage them to appreciate the giftedness in various cultures. One of the things that I think is unique about being a minority is you are automatically forced in a position to appreciate other cultures because you have no choice. And so I think this skill comes naturally, but I think we want to also, promote this with other cultures, exposure and things like that. Next slide, please. And then the last pillar, celebrate being Black. We are made in the image of God. Black is beautiful, powerful, and nothing to be ashamed of. Enough said. Next slide. Okay, so if you're thinking, what do I do? How can I get involved? Well, our next meeting, April 24th. So we meet every fourth Saturday, like I said, 10 a.m. to 12. Our next meeting will be at the Bledsoe Miller Park. So if you're familiar with the image there, the Doris Merrill Memorial, the park is right next there. MLK Street there. We have a Facebook group. It's private right now. We're trying to go local, kind of grassroots organic growth right now. And so I'm more than willing to send that link out to anyone who wants it. We do plan on making sort of a public appearance in June. And so getting with the folks and seeing if they're going to do a Juneteenth parade or something like that this year. You know, COVID, we'll see. But if they are, that'd be a huge opportunity for us kind of coming out. Maybe we can get some activity in the parade and t-shirts and things like that. If you got questions, if you got comments, if you got whatever you got, you can send it to drexel.r.king@gmail.com right there. That'll come directly to me and I can hook you up with whatever I have to my disposal. Thank you all for your time.
Well, thank you so much, Drexel. Appreciate that. We have, we're getting a little short on time, but we do have some questions from attendees, and this is directed at Patricia. Regarding, I think when you were talking about your daughter in school and the dances and stuff, you know, those kinds of things that come up, our audience members is wanting to know how exactly did you help her in, say, for using that kind of situation as an example, how did you help her get through that? What physically and verbally and everything do you do to help a child get through that kind of situation?
I wish I had a really good answer. I'm not sure that we actually did the best job. What we had always tried to do with all of our kids was to instill in them one of the things that came up and with regard to several of the other panelists, the importance of being who they were, living into who they were, and trying to give her some perspective about what high school really is. When you're in high school is everything. Once you get past high school is some fond memories, some things that weren't so much fun, but you have more life that helps to get it into perspective. And so we just tried to remind her that it was hard, continue being who she was, to not give up on, you know, being the wonderful child that she was. And that in the scheme of things, that she would eventually see that all that was important, but it wasn't the most important thing. And to just relax and wait, and it would work out. And it did. And you know, I don't want to make it sound like we were such trivial parents. We were all concerned about our child's social life, but we just didn't want her to feel like she was less than. And so we just really tried to, as I said, give her perspective. Mm-hmm. And so if she would tell you if we did a good job of that or not. But that's really all we could do. At least all that we could think to do.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So for Justin, our audience member wants to know, did you have any experiences, say, with being stopped by police or being harassed by someone that you were in fear as you got to be, you know, older and a young adult and driving and things like that? Is there anything along those lines you can share with us?
Truth be told, I did notice that around the time my first few years of driving, I didn't get stopped by the police. It was only like a few years later where I started getting stopped by the police. I think it started happening more frequently, really. There was, I always have that in the back of my mind of like, oh my gosh, what do I do? But I never necessarily had, my interactions haven't been negative. Sometimes they stop me for legit reasons, like my back tail light was out, or my license was, or not my license, but I had some issue with the car. But so I guess like how I handled it was kind of like, okay, look, just don't get scared. Make sure to keep your hands on the steering wheel. Don't give them an excuse essentially to do anything. And usually, just give the driver's license, have a chat, go and keep on about my day. It's not now, that doesn't mean it's always going to be like that, of course. But essentially the way I've always just gone about it is kind of just do what my parents told me, which is be calm, don't give them an excuse to do anything. And if they do harass me, don't say anything back, because it's better to get home and live to fight another day and then fight them in court later.
Mm-hmm. Was there, so when this happened, say the first time, was there kind of, first of all, fear on your part, and then secondly, which you've kind of indicated, and then secondly, oh my gosh, this is what my parents were talking about, kind of
it's actually funny. The first time I did get stopped, it was pulled over. It was nighttime. I was like, oh no, what's gonna happen? And I see the guy, and I went to high school with him. And so it was like, oh, hey. And then we just started chatting. We're like, oh, hey. It's like, how's Baylor? It's like, oh, Baylor's good. And then, just give the driver's license. We just check on each other. We hadn't seen each other in like 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the thing that helps with being in Waco is that Waco is so small that you tend to get to know people, or people tend to get to know you sometimes, and people tend to stay.
Mm-hmm.
At first I had that fear in the back of my head, but because it helped because I knew that person, it was better. Of course, I did get stopped by a state trooper one time when I was on the way up to Dallas. But again, that was just a case of, it was something on my part. My license was messed up, so I had to. So I guess I didn't have as much fear, just because the only way it's either I have to remain as calm as possible. That's the only way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, I have one for Brian. Someone's interested in knowing, you were talking about the question about your daughter changing schools with your daughter, moving her to a different school. What were some of the exact circumstances and experiences that she was having that caused you to consider that so heavily?
Okay, here we go. Well, as I said, some of it was during the Obama years. And one incident in particular was my daughter wore a bracelet with Obama on it, at the time. And a couple of boys actually tackled her and yanked it off. I think, just during those years, it really became intense. And not only with the students, but my wife began to feel just this awkwardness with a lot of the parents too. The racial tension was just really, it was thick in those years. And so some of the things that began to kind of, be expressed, my daughter was feeling, when she gets attacked that way. And then there were some incidents, I'll be honest with you, that they didn't tell me about because they knew me. And I was probably that parent that would go up there and overreact. So they hid some things from me, and I got some stories after the because they knew I wouldn't handle those things very well. And so, but it came to a head to where they could no longer hide from me. And then that's when we just decided that we were going to move her to a different school just because of the tension and things that were being said. I wouldn't say that necessarily there she's, was referred to as the N-word, but of of course, she did. I mean, my kids have had that experience. We've dealt with that, being called the N-word. And so, but it was just the general pressure, and even that not only she felt, but my wife felt at the time, that and how she was being treated, and even how the parents were responding and treating just the family as a whole.
Mhm. Thank you so much. We have another one, and I'm going to read this one verbatim. Would love to hear parents on the panel talk about socialization with non-Black parents. Often parents are thrown together because their children are friends, attending the same events, etc. I'm interested in hearing the perspective of about these experiences, and this is for any one of the panel members here.
Sure, I understand the question about socialization with people of other ethnic groups, or
right, with non-Black parents. You know, whether it's through school or just you know, attending events with your children, attending events with friends, and meeting parents, non-Black parents that way. And you talk about socialization. Is there a lot of socialization? Is there not? And for what reasons do you suspect, etc.?
I mean, I'll begin. I'll say this, and I'll share a quick story. One of the things I've tried to do is be intentional in that area. If I want to see change, you know, in terms of Black and white relationships, I realize that I have to be a part of the change that I want to see. So one of the things that I have done or did do, I had the privilege of meeting a lady in a training, and part of that training had to do with race. At the end, there was a module where we had to go through and have this conversation about race. And that lady talked about her grandfather being racist, but yet she loved her grandfather, and tears were coming, and just the difficulty she had, you know, knowing that this is someone she loved, her grandfather, but yet he was racist. And her openness really led to a deep conversation she and I had a deep conversation about it. And we decided that we were going to intentionally be friends. Well, she ended up being the godmother of my 3-year-old. And that was a decision that I made because I as I said, I felt like it was important if I want things to be better, I've got to do some things outside of the norm of what I've done in the past, and be intentional about that as well. So, so I want to make sure that he, my son, you know, is able to. I want him to have a strong sense of who he is as a Black person, but I also want him to be able to socialize with all people, and I have to be intentional there too. And so, as much as I'm being intentional about him understanding who he is as a Black man, as a Black kid, as a Black man, I'm intentional about his socialization, you know, with all people. So,
Thank you. Patricia, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that question since I saw it pop up in the Q&A. And I guess perhaps the best way to describe it is there was, I guess I'm sort of ambivalent about the question itself, because as my children were young, there was a lot of socializing with the white children. And I got to know a lot of the parents, and the parents knew me, and the children knew me, and I knew them. And because they were, at least my older children were going to private school, it was a small school. And so everybody kind of knew everybody. The classes were small, so the parents all knew everybody. As the children got older, there was still lots of socializing among the children. And I think it was certainly easier with my son, because I think boys are, at least boys can be, I shouldn't generalize, but boys can overlook a whole bunch of stuff. And so all the boys spent a lot of time together. Large groups of the boys spent a lot of time together. I certainly knew a lot of the parents and continue to see them from time to time, and to say socialize is probably an overstatement, but those years were something special. That said, there are also things that I know that my kids were probably not invited to. If you know anything about Vanguard, you know that Vanguard has a lot of kids that participate in Cotton Palace, and clearly that was not going to ever be anything that we were going to be participating in. And there's a lot of socializing that happens there. There are other things that, I mean, we didn't belong to the country club, never are going to belong to it. So that on the one hand, I liked a lot of the parents, and I think that we were well accepted. My kids were well accepted. On the other hand, I'm not going to say that the doors were flung wide open, or that we pressed to have those doors wide open. So are my kids friends with, do they continue to be friends with the kids they went to school with? The answer is yes, for those that they form close friendships with. Or do we socialize with those parents? The answer is, again, not really socialize, but when we see each other, we're always happy to see each other, spend a whole lot of time catching up on what's happening. But again, there's just sort of I'm not sure how to describe exactly what that is. And what we tried to do, we just wanted the kids to feel like they weren't isolated while they were in school, but not something that we pressed. And I don't feel like they were left out of a lot of stuff, but they were left out of some stuff.
Mm-hmm. Good. Thank you so much. So we're nearing the end. We want to try to close at 8 o'clock. And I wanted to just mention just a book that to me was absolutely so stunning. If you are interested in this topic at all, it's called Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. It is, to me, just an unbelievably moving and poetically written book. Because I have horrible eyesight, listened to it on audio, and the author is reading it himself, which I don't always recommend that, especially if it's not the author himself, but his writing is so fantastic. And it is a letter to his then 15-year-old son. And it's just, I just can't recommend this book highly enough. I think I'm going to have to read it a second time because I'm afraid I might have missed a few things. So just that little recommendation from me personally. And then a little commercial about the Community Race Relations Coalition. Our website is CRRCwaco.org. And we would love it if you could join us. We have yard signs regarding equality. Let it begin with me. We have, we'll shortly have t-shirts and polo shirts for sale, and you can just get on our mailing list, or you can join us for just $25 for an individual. And we would love to have you join your voice with ours in, again, promoting respect, acceptance, and inclusion for everyone in our community. Our focus is on the Waco community, which of course means we especially appreciate too Drexel and his group, whose focus is also on our Waco community. We appreciate that very much. So closing out our meeting tonight is going to be April Neal, who has written a poem especially for this particular event. So take it away, April.
Thank you. So March 18th, it's weird, but it was National Incredible Awesome Kid Day or something. And so I wrote this poem to Cadence, but also knowing that this is for people who feel like me. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm a little hoarse. I've been trying to drink tea this whole thing. Cadence. Don't you know there's a can in your name? Rhythm in your soul. Can't stop, won't stop in your spirit. That's my jam. The wheels on the bus go round and round. Like the ideas turn in your brain, like you stay in the state of create. How you're always down to play chase, even when I'm not playing, Cade. You amuse me daily. You grew me greatly. You're a whole reason to live, kid. To hustle, to not go off. You keep me out of trouble. Sidebar. There were times when I'd have to clean your nose because it's gross, and clearing it would help you not struggle to breathe. But when you would turn your head, and you be resisting, I would almost cry because I already knew at 8 months, I have to teach you, you just can't be out here resisting. I hate when I have to hold your head still and show you that I'm in control, that I know what's best, to not fight your natural reaction that all babies have, because you don't get to just be a baby, because you're not just a baby boy, you're a Black baby man child, because Black children don't always get to just be Cadence. Do you know when to stop, drop, and roll? Never during an arrest. It'll look something like you're trying to resist and you may not come home to me. Cadence. Do you know there's a can in your name and you can do anything, but you, son, must be cautious? Like there's a C in your name, but I need you to always be cautious, critical, or they may profile you criminal and you may not come home to me. Do you know to look both ways before crossing the street? Good. Do you know to look straight ahead, do not cross your body or make any sudden movements should you ever get stopped on the street? Do you know you may not make it home? And mama worries about you and your asthma and your Blackness, that if you complain that you can't breathe, that they will rebuttal that you can breathe as long as you can speak. I want you to speak up for yourself, but I'm scared you won't come home. I'm scared if you try to explain, you won't come home. Cadence. There's a dance in your name, but you are not, son. There is dance in your name, and I hope you never stop. There's a can. There's a man, even though he be child, Tamir, in your eyes, may you always be seen for the good in you. Thanks.
Thank you. And thanks to all of our panel members so much. We so appreciate your being willing to serve on this panel. Thank you to all of you attendees. And just a reminder that the Race Relations Coalition of Waco has a YouTube channel, and this recording will be up there in a day or two if you want to relive any part of this or want to share it with friends. Thank you so much for being here, every one of you. Take care. Godspeed.